There it is.
Okay. All right. Got the recording started. Okay. So this is for the March Madness for the foundations level. We're going to be doing the program overview. I'm going to do a little bit of intro credits while we wait for people to come in. So let's see, some people don't know, if you haven't heard yet, Kentucky CC communities have their own Facebook and Instagram pages. If you're on the southern half of the state, you get the southern, it's called Southern and Western. If you're on the northern or the eastern half of the state, it's called Northern and Eastern. I put things like sales on there, updates, a lot of the events that I do, I put on there, but there's also like timely encouragement, things like if people are getting into mock trial season, I put things about mock trial. I know when we were doing cycle 1, when we were studying the Greek Roman gods, and some people were like, why are we studying pagan gods? I put some videos on there that kind of explained what's going on with that and the purpose behind that. So there is timely encouragement, but if you don't interact with these pages, they won't ever show up in your feed. So if you choose to follow these pages, make sure you go through and like some things and interact a little bit. That way it does show up on your feed eventually, throughout. But if you stop paying attention to it, Facebook and Instagram will say, oh, they don't care about that. And you won't get like the sale updates, like we do pop-up sales, things like that.
I think you might need to take control. I'm only seeing the March Madness Foundation lead-in slide.
Yes, Carrie's got control. This is Candid Camera. Those are the links for that. And that's a good chance for me to talk about. A lot of these slides have clickable links on them. So can you see it now? Okay, good. There we are. So these are clickable links. You can use these to go find those pages, or if you're watching the recording, you can just, this is the handle, I guess is what it's called, if you want to search for those, and that's what the landing pages look like. But anytime you see that circle with the C in the Kentucky, if you see that anywhere, that's me. I'm the one behind those things. So. All right, if you are on a March Madness call, chances are you've seen these already, but there is a small newsletter that's going around linking people to these times. So if you have other levels, just kind of make sure, check out the times. They have changed a little bit. I think I updated this slide here, but they've changed just a little bit from when it originally went out. So if you want to see the current times, because we had some directors get sick and such and had to adjust their schedules. So click on the link to actually go to the website. The SMORE website is I update that, and then you'll see the current version and the current links. Any mistakes that get made when the newsletter goes out will be updated on the actual website. So I just finished a new product blitz last night. It's a big long video where I take like about 8 or 9 hours worth of my training videos, and I condense it to about an hour and a half ish with plus question time. Of all the new products and why we're making the changes we are. There is a recording of that. If you're watching this recording, you can contact your LCD or your LR to get the recording for that, or it will be on my YouTube page when I get it on there. So, but it just covers the new things that we're going through. There will be in March 28th. This is clickable. If you want to register for the pop-up bookshop, it's in-person shopping. There will be actually physical things that you can take home, like the new Latin flashcards are there. Lee Borton's New Habits book will be there. That you can buy in person and take with you. But you'll also be able to look at like anything that's in the catalog. If it's in, I don't think there's anything that is in this that is not going to be there for you to actually touch and feel and look at to see, to help you make choices for next year. I know online shopping is super, super convenient, but sometimes it really is nice to see the actual products. Okay, and then you can click there to register. Directors, and if you're in CC leadership, like directors and challenge tutors and whatnot, there will be a preview the night before, so you can come ask some, like, you can ask the brutal questions that you might not feel comfortable asking in front of your class, in front of, maybe new people or visitors or something like that. You can ask me, why are they doing this? And what's going on here? Oh, and then we can like hash through it and discuss it together before you come back and bring your people. Some directors and LCDs are actually making it a community thing to do this March 28th. They are either going out to lunch before and then showing up here as a community, or they're going to show up before lunch and then go out afterwards and kind of make it a community connection day. And then at that, talk about like their plans for the summer of like how they're going to stay connected, maybe do some book clubs, things like that. So they're kind of doing it as all right, let's get ready for summer. We don't want to disconnect. We want to like keep in touch, so that we're supporting each other over the summer too. Okay, we are another way to connect over the summer. This is the parent practicum. These are clickable links. You should find your local link, your local practicum, and go ahead and register for that. This year it is going to be Latin, which I'm really excited about. I've already been like going through the slides and going through the training material. We will be singing a Latin hymn together as a community, and I think it's going to be beautiful. I'm really excited about it. And then Tobin Dubin, I don't think I have a slide about his videos. He's been putting out some videos that you can look for online or on my Facebook pages, but really gets me excited about why do we learn Latin? It's like, everybody's like, it's a dead language. Why are we doing this? But it really does, it goes into like why we do that. And it's really beautiful the way he puts it. So, all right, so this is March Madness. So we kind of already talked through how, like who all's on the call. So I'm going to kind of scroll through this. But just to introduce myself, I am Krista Bottomley. I am your Kentucky State book rep. I cover both halves of the state. I have been in CC for, I think 14 years now, 14, 15, something like that. But I've been doing classical education since my oldest one, who's leaning on my youngest one there. I've been doing classical education basically since from the beginning. She's never attended a school. We felt called to homeschool when she was about a year old, and she's 23 now. So however you want to count all those years. So she is a Challenge 4 graduate. She graduated CC, and she is about to graduate college, top of her class at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. And she is just thriving and doing well. And I can't take credit for that. It really is CC community working with me. It really is the classical method and really is the Lord. And I have a lot I could say about that, but I'll just kind of keep moving. All right, so Sebastian there, he's on the left at the top picture. He is in Challenge B. Ransom is in Challenge A. And then I still have a little one, Frederick, who is in Foundations, will be starting Essentials next year. So even though, like, I've seen one child through the whole program, I've seen where it goes, I've seen what CC produces, but I'm also still in the thick of the things with Frederick. He's still learning to read. We're still like going through all this memory work, and we're just like imprinting the new grammar. So it kind of gives me a little perspective. I'm still in the trenches with you. So Carrie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Van Hoos, and I'm at the Frankfort campus. I'm the director of Foundations and Essentials there. This is our 7th year in CC. So my oldest is in Challenge B. And then I have a daughter who's will be starting Challenge A next year. And then my youngest is not super excited about giving up his afternoon playtime and joining Essentials next year. So, but he has been, raised up through Foundations, and we're having a lot of fun with memory work right now. I think that's all the things on me. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I just really appreciate Carrie for both her energy and enthusiasm, but also her just her ability to articulate her ideas and her passion and kind of share that passion with others. So. All right, so this is our meeting agenda. So greeting and intros, etc. We are going to go over the point of contemporary education versus classical education. We're going to go in a little depth on that because if you folks are still learning about the Foundations program, chances are you're still getting used to the idea of classical education as well. So we are going to go do a deep dive on that. Well, not super deep. It's actually classical education is way too deep to do in 15 minutes, but we'll give as much attention as we can to it right now. Then Carrie's going to give her perspective as a director. I will talk about the resources that are available to support you in that. And then I might have time for my daughter might come down. She's the college graduate and give you her perspective as like the student perspective. And then we'll have a Q&A time, which will be parents' perspective. And you'll see, I'm going to look back and forth. I actually have 2 monitors when I do this. When I am looking at you folks, I'm also looking at 2 screens. So you guys are in 2 different locations for me. Okay, so let's talk about modern education, what modern education does, and the goals of it. So most of us, this is what we were familiar with. This is what we were raised with. This is where probably our parents and maybe our grandparents were also raised with. But modern education places the student at the center, and or sometimes the parents, and says, it says, what is the student's goals? What do you want to be when you grow up? And we all hear that question being asked of our kids all the time. What do you want to be when you grow up? Or if you're in a private school, they'll say, oh, what are the parents' goals? Because they're purchasing, they're paying the tuition. We want to keep them happy. What do the parents want to see? Or if it's a government school, the government is thinking, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want to focus on? So our population are good citizens and good contributors to our society. But ultimately, in all three of those strategies of who's in the middle, it's all just man. Man is at the center of modern education. And what you'll see going around the student there is all these individual isolated pockets of what we call subjects. And what's her name? Dorothy Sayers has this fabulous essay in this little book here that we'll talk about in a bit, called the Lost Tools of Learning. And she talks about how there are these like watertight bulkheads around these subjects where they never interact. So there you have history, you have science, language, fine arts, math, etc. But all these things they don't touch, and they don't really interact with each other. The bell rings, you leave math class and you go over to science class, and then you might use a little math in science, but then when the bell rings and you go to history, well, that has nothing to do with science or math, so you just study that in isolation. Moving to a poor Christian education, they often mean well, but they're still putting the student at the center, the student's goals, the parents' goals, and they just tack on a Bible study class. Maybe you go to chapel once a week and things like that. There's just a smattering of the Bible throughout. Now you get a good Christian education, they rightfully take man out of the center of things and they put God there. And they said, because God created the universe, he created all these subjects. So we need to study him, like study everything in light of who he is. Then you get a great Christian education. And this is where you show that, no, all these subjects do glorify God. Okay. So when you're studying math, it should teach you something about the person who created math. And when you study language and fine arts and science and philosophy, all these things should give glory to God, because if he created them, he left his fingerprints on them. When he didn't just walk away, his fingerprints are in there and he's still interacting with us through the subjects that he created. Now you get to a classical education. So classical education is where, now if I could, I would erase the circles around the words here, but it's saying that there aren't these airtight bulkheads around each one of these subjects. These things all interweave in and out of each other. So history has a lot to, like how math was developed, and the math that we know today has a basis in history, and it is a product of the historical time period in which it was developed. And then of course, like math interacts with science, the language that we have, the way English works is very much related to the history behind how it developed. So all of these things kind of interweave. I have a really good book called Mathematics, Is God Silent? And it is an excellent example of what a classical book would be. Because if I go to try to put that on my shelf, I'll get stumped, because if I go to the math section, I start to put it on there and I say, wait a minute, hold on a second, this is actually a history of math book. So then I go over to the history shelf and I'm like, no, I can't really figure out where to put it on my history shelf, because it has so much philosophy in it too. And come to think of it, he brought science in on that in this discussion as well. And that would be what a classical educator, the way a classical educator thinks, is that all these things interact. And what's more is they bring glory to God. So that's where you get CC's. If you've ever seen our catechesis wheel, this is what we have in mind behind that. Now, there is one other thing that we change on that. You'll notice the little circles there no longer have subjects in them. They have what we call strands. So instead of math, science, history, philosophy, etc., we have exposition, grammar, debate, research, reasoning, and logic. And that's because we are, instead of using subjects as our core of study, we're using skills and strategies for learning and modes of discussion and expressing ourselves. And then we use the subjects as the things that we play with while we're learning those. So for example, a very good example is for research, we find that it is really good to practice the skill of research, like good, thorough, responsible research while we're studying the different sciences. So we might study biology or chemistry or things like that, but we're ultimately working on the skill of how to do responsible research. All right, so we're going to talk about the trivium a little bit now. I think a lot of you have heard of the trivium before. If you haven't, trivium just means three roads or three ways, and that's saying there are three methods or three ways that we learn anything. So in the beginning, when you're first learning any subject, if you are well, let me back up a second. So classical education is a method. Now there are a lot of methods. There are probably 1,000 methods for education, 1,000 models for education. And there have been throughout all history. But if you went, maybe 500 years ago, there were other methods of learning floating around. But classical education has kind of been there all throughout history. Now, those other things have fallen away, so nobody's talking about them anymore. But classical education continued to move through. Now we have other ideas too. I don't know what the current ones are, the progressive ideas, or I'm sure people who are trained educators could tell me the titles of them, but I think they too will fall away. And classical education has stood the test of time, and I do believe it's because it's God's original plan for learning, and it did originate in the mind of God, and therefore it is timeless. And we'll go into that in a bit. So going back to the trivium says that when you learn anything, if you're going to do it most efficiently and classically, you start off by learning the grammar. The grammar of anything. This isn't talking just about language, although it does correlate because it means there's a lot of words involved, but it's knowing the basic names of things, the facts, the basic, like the dates, when did this happen, the basic core knowledge of any subject. Let's see. So for example, if I'm working in photography, I heard Lee Borton's talking about, she was taking a photography class. I might need to know what is a camera? What is a lens? What does aperture mean? What is depth? Like, how does that all relate? Well, you don't actually worry about how it relates yet, but you're just learning like the pieces of it and like the grammar and the vocab associated with it. So then you move on into the dialectic stage, in which you start developing, you're trying to understand how things fit together. So this is where you ask a lot of questions of why. Like, why does this matter? How does this fit with this? Okay, so I know who Thomas Jefferson is, and I know that he did the Louisiana Purchase. I know what that is. And it looks like on my timeline, that's the same time that Napoleon was over in Europe. And I know who Napoleon is, but what do they have to do with each other? And as I'm starting to ask questions and kind of tease things out, I start to realize, oh, Thomas Jefferson could make the Louisiana Purchase for the amazing price that he did, because it was a huge bargain, because Napoleon was fighting his wars in Europe, and that affected, like, he really needed to finance his wars. And so those two things they fit together, and they are interconnected things, even though they're continents apart. And that would be the dialectic stage, asking the why and the how. So with, like, back to our camera model, it would be understanding, okay, so if I'm trying to take a picture where I want to really focus in on one thing, how does adjusting the aperture do that? If I switch lenses, what does that do to my picture? So then we get to the rhetoric stage. This is where you've integrated your learning. You're able to think about it and actually express it to other people, and you usually apply it. So this would be clearly demonstrating your understanding so that you can bear fruit and wisdom and teach others as well. So back with the camera analogy, that would be actually taking pictures. For National Geographic, photographers are great rhetoricians, is what we would say. But taking pictures that you might want to hang on your wall, or even just taking pictures that you put in a photo album with your kids. Oh, I can actually take a good picture. I'm no longer playing around with my tools. I'm not struggling to understand aperture and lenses. I'm now able to take pictures that that actually bless others. And that's where we say it's bearing fruit and wisdom. Okay, so we find that when the strategies for learning anything, and anybody, it doesn't matter if you're 80 years old or 8 years old, the most efficient way to learn is still to go through that natural progression. But we also find that this correlates with child's natural developmental stages. So you'll see, like my Frederick, my little 8-year-old Frederick, or a very small child just learning to talk, they are very much in this grammar stage. They are just soaking information. Little 3-year-olds running around. What is this? What is this? What is this? My 8-year-old is, he knows what a bird is, but he'll ask me all the time, what's that bird on the feeder? What's that bird on the feeder? And he's just like, oh, that's a junco. Oh, that's a cardinal. Oh, wait, no, wait, that's actually a robin. So this is where they're soaking in all that information. They're forming basic vocabulary for all these things that they want to talk about. But then they start getting a little older. This would be my middle two boys, my 13-year-old, my 15-year-old. They're getting into the adolescent stage where they're starting to argue with me, and Dorothy Sayers calls it the pert stage. It's the classic sassy talking back teenager. Now they need to learn to do their questioning respectfully, but they will start to develop a lot of questions. Like, why is it that we see a flycatcher over there and he's not at the bird feeder with the junco and the cardinal? But if they don't have that vocab because of the grammar stage, they can't have a conversation with me about that. And they say, okay, so what is a raptor versus, these songbirds? Like trying to understand all these different things. And that's where they also start to make these connections, things that they've learned about in history. And they start asking more questions, kind of teasing things out. They've read the Where the Red Fern Grows. They know that story. They know the basic structure of that story. But now they're asking, well, do you think it was the right thing for Billy to run off and go get those dogs without telling his parents? And do you think it was right for, the grandfather to make the choices that he did? So this is your classic dialectic stage. And you get into the rhetoric stage, and my daughter is definitely that right now. And if she comes down, you'll kind of notice that she just can't wait to express what she's learned. She knows a lot of these facts, and she's wrestled through them and teased out like, what is the significance? And now she wants to start sharing that with others. And this is where kids go off to college campuses, and all of a sudden they want to express something. But if they haven't learned good facts and quality information, that stuff that is true, and if they haven't learned to wrestle with these ideas and have respectful dialogue and ask respectful questions of others and of themselves about these things, they will go off to college. And what do? They might have riots, they protest, they spew out stuff. It's not necessarily very beneficial or helpful, but they have this natural urge to share. And I think any of us feel that way when we get good at something, when we've learned something well and we've teased things out, we just can't wait to share that with others, which is partly why I like doing this. I like to share what I know about classical education. And so CC is trying to use these, we're harnessing the natural progression that children have developmentally to fit into the classical model, and train students how to do these things well. Okay, so, and you'll notice, and as I said earlier, I don't think this originated. You'll see some people who say, oh, yes, it comes, it originates in the Greeks and the Romans came up with this. And yeah, it's true. Socrates and such, they do discuss these things a lot in their writings. And you also, even Dorothy Sayers, when she's saying it in this essay here, The Lost Fools, she talks about it as being a medieval thing, because yes, the monks did it a great deal. But Lee Bortons and people at CC, we really believe that this originated in the mind of God. And you can even see this about how he's arranged the Bible. You'll see at the beginning, the orange colored books of the Bible really do just hit on the names, like who you need to know, the stories. There's a lot of storytelling, a lot of this is the law. These are the right ways. These are the principles that God wants you to use to guide your life. So you have rules, you have names, dates, etc. And then moving on into the blue areas, and you'll see I have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A little bit of orange there too, because that's also in the Gospels as well. But then you see these blue areas is where people are starting to ask questions. Job is saying, why is this going on? If I could only see the Lord face to face and discuss with him, he wants to have a discussion. Song of Solomon, there's a lot of a lot of teasing things. Actually, I shouldn't use Song of Solomon as an example. Let's use Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes is very great for saying, but I see this. I see those who are, I know what it says in Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, etc. But I see that sometimes the wicked do prosper. How does this work, Lord? And him teasing things out, and he does come to a beautiful conclusion towards the end. But there is a lot more wrestling, Jeremiah and in Lamentations, wrestling with, Lord, what are you doing to your people? And Jesus himself, when he's talking in the Gospels, he is asking questions of people. The Pharisees definitely know their law, but he's saying, you have heard it said this, but what does this mean? And he goes on into that. And then you'll see in the letters, like Paul's letters or the apostles' letters to the different churches are elaborating on, okay, so you've heard this. We've teased things out. Now you will go and do likewise. And you need to get rhetorical, and this is how it plays out in your real life. So you do see this in scripture throughout, and throughout scripture, you'll see this. And so the goal is, this is a quote from Lee that she uses at her Iowa talk. If anybody wants the link to that, just text me and I'll give you the link to that. But she says the goal is to learn to name like Adam, to ask questions like Jesus, and to persuade like Paul. And all that is fed by the light of truth. Okay, and you see that there in the top corner. The Lord is our light of truth that injects life into everything. Because ultimately, like if I teach my children, and I'm struggling with this with my Challenge B student right now, he's learning fallacies, we're dabbling with logic, but if he is using that in the wrong way, and if he is not doing it in search of truth and in the light of God's truth to understand, then these can be very, very evil, wicked, dangerous tools. So everything that we're teaching our students, we need to bring the light of truth into it and ultimately bring back to the Lord to use for his purposes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about doxology. So a lot of people have seen on this catechesis wheel, they see this like, the grammar stage and then the dialectic stage and then the rhetoric stage. And then they see this top part and they're like, doxology. That's that thing that we sing in church. But what does that have to do with classical education? And doxology has Lee says that doxology essentially means like an echo and celebration. So let me tell a little story to illustrate that a bit. So when my daughter was in Challenge 2, she was learning a little bit about music theory, but she was also taking piano. And so she was over working on her piano lesson. She called me over and she's like, Mom, come here, look in the piano. This is so cool. And I'm like, sweetie, I know how piano works, and she's like, no, just trust me. Look in the piano. So we flip up the top because we have an upright, flip up the top, and I take a look down and she's like, watch this. And she hits middle C really hard. And I look in and yes, I know the hammer hits the string. And I'm like, yep, okay, that's great, sweetie. And she said, no, Mom, you're not seeing it. Look at the other strings. I'll do it again. She did it again. And I noticed that even though all the other strings were still, except every eighth string, one of the strings would be vibrating, even though she didn't hit it with the hammer. I was like, oh, okay, that's strange. And she said, watch, I'll do it again. She hit the damper, hit D. And it was a different set of strings, but all along there, they were vibrating. So then she's really excited now. She runs out of the room. She goes in and gets her violin because she's been tinkering with that. And so I'm watching her. She's like, no, keep looking in the piano. And she draws the bow across really hard to make a really loud note. And I look down in there and she hasn't touched the piano, but the C chords are vibrating all through the piano. And that's because of something called resonance. And that's actually how you tune a piano, and the tuning forks and such is all based on this scientific principle. Science and math are still in music. That is just this resonance. And I think that Christians, when we have the Holy Spirit, there is something of that resonance that works with us when we see God's fingerprints in all his creation. So when we're studying in research or in logic or when we study Latin grammar and we see God's fingerprints, there is something in us that just sort of like vibrates in resonance with the Lord. I was sitting in on my kids' piano lesson, and I don't remember what their piano instructor said, but there was just something so beautiful that like she wasn't talking about the Lord. She was just talking about music theory. And I started seeing it in the light of the math map that we've been studying. And then also some of the science that I'd heard my daughter talking about. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my goodness, Jesus is in this. Jesus is in music theory. And I just started crying in the middle of sitting through and the music instructor stopped and said, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm like, oh, I just see God's fingerprints. And she didn't know what I was talking about, but how could I express that, and that is that doxology that just, it's that reverberation in us of seeing the Lord. So this is Lee Bortons, if you don't know. Lee Bortons is the founder of our program. You've probably heard me refer to her many times. She did homeschool her 4 boys. They were in 2 sets. She has an older set and then she has a younger set. The older set, she didn't classically educate them. She was just trying to homeschool them as best as she could while trying to use classical subject matter, but not using the classical method. So when she got to they got a little older and they wanted to read the Declaration of Independence. And she found that she was really stumbling through it and having difficulty. And she's like, oh my goodness, what did we do wrong? How could I'm even having trouble? And she, by the way, she is everybody jokes and says she's a rocket scientist, but she is an aeronautical engineer by her trade, and so was her husband. And then she moved into homeschooling her boys. So she's a really smart woman, but she was having trouble reading our Declaration of Independence. So she said, okay, I got to back up and I have to start thinking about what is it we need to prepare my students to be able to have this classical education as an older student, because she had developed the challenge program. Challenge program is what we have for our junior high and high school students. And she had been putting things together, and other people had been coming to her house to participate, and they were loving it, but they felt that they were ill-equipped to actually have these discussions and to be to really be dialectic and rhetorical about these. So that's why she formed both the Foundations program and the Essentials program to feed into that. So anytime you look at any curriculum, I strongly advise two things: look at their vision and where they want to go, but also look at the program and see what is their goal for whether they want the program to go as well. So you might just have, you know, a 5-year-old at home that you're considering with working through Foundations with. But if you look at, you should look at what are they doing as juniors and seniors in high school? Do I want that goal? So whether you're looking at Sunlight or, you know, Memoria Press or all these different programs, consider what is the end goal, and does what they're doing when they're young feed into that. So that is the history behind how she started off the program. Robert Bortons is now, you know, he's a CC graduate, of course, but he wasn't classically educated initially, even though he had classical subject matter. But now he is our CEO, and he helps run the program. And his wife is actually an Essentials tutor now, and they have 3 children. His daughter, I think, is in her 3rd year of Essentials, so he's getting to, you know, he's also redeeming his own education as he goes through this. And he also is an engineer by trade. All right, so our mission. So when I said you need to know where you're going, whenever you look at a program, and you might love CC and you've been in it for years, but there's going to be years that it gets hard. And if you don't know what the vision is, it's going to be hard to stick it out. So our mission, and you'll hear us say this all over the place, and this is in our catalog. If you want to follow, if you have a catalog and you look at, I think it's page 16. Nope, it's not. Is it page 8? Oh, page 5. All of this, the next few slides are all laid out on page 5. I would strongly encourage everybody to look that over, make sure your husband has looked it over, and make sure you guys are on board, because this is the vision behind what CC is doing. So our mission is to know God and make him known. No, our mission is not to get great SAT scores. I think you will get great SAT scores, but our ultimate mission is to know God deeply through what we're studying and to make him known to others. Our vision for what we're doing as we develop our programs is that Classical Conversations fulfills this mission by curating curriculum, providing services, and equipping parents to build flourishing homeschool communities. Now, I want you to notice it doesn't say equipping students, it says equipping parents. This is very, very important, because our ultimate goal is to redeem the education of the parent, who will then model that for their student to pass along. So sometimes things get hard because we as parents were not educated this way, but we are helping our own understanding of God's universe as we are showing our children that. Okay, so I'm gonna click this. So we have 5 new vision statements. It is to pursue truth, embrace stewardship, act with courage, preserve freedom, and do hard things. That do hard things, it is easy when your kids are 5 to think, oh, I can do this. And the hardest thing I'm going to deal with is temper tantrums, or my child doesn't know how to hold a pencil, or something like that. But honestly, as you move along, things do get hard. And there are days, especially like January and February, and you might be having a rough year. Maybe there's illness in your family. We had a child that actually got polio a number of years ago, and it got hard. It got really hard. All the fun just seemed to dissipate. And part of what CC is doing is saying, no, we will help you through the hard times. We will help you stay through to the end. And it does take courage. Honestly, it takes courage when you see all your neighbors putting their kids on the school bus or driving to the local private school. It takes courage to think, no, I can do this, and I will trust the Lord if he has called you to homeschool. And I hope that you're here because you have been called by the Lord to homeschool your children. But if he's called you to do this, it takes courage sometimes, and he will stretch you and he will push you. You should not feel like that is a strange thing that is happening to you when you are afraid and feel like you are not enough, because you aren't. You aren't enough. And that's why the community needs to come alongside you, and you need to lean hard into the Lord and trust him in that process. Okay, so I'm going to go through these rather quickly. So we have 3 main pillars. It's Christian, classical and community. So the pillars of what we do for the Christian pillar is the purpose of education is to know God and to make him known. God trusts parents with their children, and so should we. And wrestling with truth promotes blessing and virtue for the whole community. Now, moving into community, we say education is the responsibility of the family, not the government. The education is the responsibility of the family with support from fellow believers, hopefully through your church as well. The support of community enhances our ability to fulfill parental duties. And the accountability of community both sharpens and humbles its members. Sometimes we go into homeschooling because we think, I've got something to teach my students, but there's a lot of humbling that happens through the homeschool journey. All right, so we are classical, as we've been talking about. Classical education embodies the most natural skills. Truth is required to inculcate wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And classical education prepares us to accept the responsibilities of Christian freedom. I'm going to go through these quick too. We have these are on the bottom of page 5 still yet. Your leadership is all called to hold to these core values. So you need to know that when we're making decisions about things, these are the things that we go back to over and over again and say, okay, am I following these things? So it's grace in speech, and they each have a verse backing them up. But is what I'm doing, do I have grace in speech, humility of mind, integrity in action, diligence in my work, and excellence in results? And we are hoping that we will be able to pass these on to the students as well as we model this for our students. Okay, so back into that. So each one of the grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric stages, I'm going to go through this quickly, but you are going to see these if you stick through in CC through the high school years, you will see these over and over and over again. And that doesn't mean it needs to be boring. It means that you need to deeper and add more layers. It's kind of like the trunk of the tree. Okay, for our trivium, trunk of the tree has many layers. We build layers of understanding. There was a time when I thought I understood all this, and I had only just scratched the surface. So you're going to hear it again and again, and sometimes it'll get boring, and then sometimes it'll get more exciting again as you learn a new level. But the basic skills of the grammar stage, which is in the foundation stage, we're focusing on grammar, is learning naming. Okay, what are the names of things? Basic grammar. Attending, how do I pay attention to this? Because it is actually hard work for a child just to sit when their body's natural state is to be moving. So naming, attending, memorizing. How do I memorize things? There's a lot of ways we do that through body movements. It doesn't just have to be flashcards. Expressing, how do I get this to come out of my mouth? With thoughts in here, how do I express those things verbally? And then storytelling, how do I make that into a whole picture to share with others? Okay, in the dialectic stage, I'm not going to go into these in depth. In dialectic stage, we focus on definition, studying things through definition, comparison, relationship, testimony, and circumstance. And then the rhetoric stage, we practice when we're expressing to others and using invention, arrangement, elocution, memory, and delivery. Okay, and so that is our grand catechesis wheel. This is on page 8. This is the whole big picture of everything that we've just tried to put in an elegant wheel. Now a little bit more systematically in right brain, left brain. The one is the right brain, the other's the left brain. I forget which one's which, but this one's more analytical. This is the scope and sequence of how we go through the program. So you'll see at the top is foundations and essentials, which is what we're going to focus in on. You still see those strands in there, although they're not doing it. They're preparing to digging into these strands, but we're just providing a foundation work for that. So my dog just came in the door. All right, Carrie, you can go ahead and take it away. I'll rest my vocal cords a bit.
All right, so we are going to get into the meat of foundations today. So that's what you guys were here for, is to learn more about our foundations program and what we will focus on. It jumped all the way back on me, so hold on one second. I'm trying to get it to go forward. Here we go. So close. There's a lot of slides. Krista, well done. Thank you for all that. You covered a lot of information. And for anyone, if that's new to you, if you're not familiar with those things, the catalog is such a great resource that really dives into that. It's not just in one place. There's, if you want to know more, you'll find another page with multiple paragraphs or a testimony from a CC parent that is talking about these topics that Krista just went over. And so the first one for Foundations, another thing to consider is that we enter into this pyramid of a parent, a tutor, and a student, those three cords that are pulled together, marching forward together in this pursuit of education. So you at the top, parent, you're at the top because you are your student's teacher. You'll notice the word teacher is not in this because we don't have teachers. At Classical Conversations, you are the teacher, we are the tutors. And that tutor is a lead learner, someone who is with your student demonstrating how to do the new grammar or whatever topic they're learning as they go through the challenge years. But you as the parent maintain that ultimate leadership. And so the student is in that relationship with the tutor, respecting the extension of the authority from the parent that is given to the tutor as they are leading in class on community days. And you can see this as, again, a biblical thing that if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So this partnership is really important, and information does and needs to flow between, especially the parent and tutor, those younger years. I rely heavily on all of my children's tutors to make sure that what is happening in class, I'm attending to it well at home so that my student is prepared, especially as they get beyond foundations. So a quick overview of what happens, like what is foundation? So foundations is that grammar stage. So students ages 4 through 12 or through their 6th grade year, if you prefer to look through grade levels, that is our foundations program. We meet once a week on Friday, for a while, I won't say on Fridays. That's when my group meets, is on Fridays. So one day a week, once a week for 24 weeks. And it's always in the morning and we end with lunchtime. So 9:15 is roughly the estimate for each community to start. Each one's slightly different, depending upon your morning presentation opening assembly. So that is how our community day will always begin, is with an opening assembly, a gathering of the families in fellowship. There's typically a devotional time in there. A family presentation occurs during that opening assembly where we rotate through, and that's done differently at each community. And then there will be, at our community, we do pledges. So we'll have a pledge to the Bible, a pledge to the flag, and a time of prayer before the students leave to go into their actual classroom and start at 9:30. And so on continuing through that day, at 9:30, they'll begin their 5 crisp components. So that's our new memory work for 30 minutes. You'll see that these are all divided into 30-minute sections, and they are crisp because we need to move through each one of these. And there's a lot of questions that can come, which is why parents are in the class for each of these. It's not a drop-off program. You are the teacher, you are present with your student through the foundations class levels, and that way you are hearing the tutor model for you how to do this at home. And the tutors are trained. The CC does a wonderful job of equipping each of us as parents and as tutors and leadership in how to lead through the classical model, asking these questions and helping the students learn, okay, can you name this for me? Let's attend to this. What do you see here? So helping them get into the lingo of classical education. If you're like me, I did not come through, I'm a product of public education. So I learn a lot through the different equipping that CC offers. And so your tutor is a great resource to help you understand how to ask those questions at home, how to lead your student through these different things at home. So those 5 components are new memory work, which is your new grammar, a science demonstration, fine arts, student presentations, and review games. So you see up there our subjects, which are linked to the strands that are in each level of CC. So our new grammar has components of math, Latin, science, English, timeline, history and geography, and the Bible. And so in community, the families will gather and, we have this demonstrated for you and you see that. What's important and the most questions I get as a director is, well, how do I do this at home? What am I supposed to do at home? And so it is really up to you. That's the beauty of homeschooling. There's not a list that you must check off every day. There is not a requirement that you have to do. But we encourage you to take this new grammar at a minimum and review that at some point throughout the week. If you do it daily, wonderful. If you do it once a week, that's great too, depending upon the age and stage of your student and what the needs are of your family. There's also other topics that you can dive into, and there's some resources I'll go into in a minute that help you do that at home. Because CC covers a lot of information, we have 3 cycles of foundations. So for cycle 1, 2, and 3, you see that they all cover the same math and timeline. That's consistent throughout because math is math is math. And our timeline doesn't change either. They're memorizing from creation to present day, and every year they are reciting the same thing. Those are the things that I encourage families to pour into initially. If you're going to focus on mastering anything, let's focus on those because they're going to do it so consistently. And that allows the student to feel a sense of accomplishment because it's not something different each year. The cycles rotate through. We're in cycle 2 currently, but next year will be cycle 3. So you can see how things change in Latin and science, English, history, and the Bible verses that are recommended. So diving into those CRISP components is our new memory work. And this can be confusing if you're not familiar with the classical model of layering information, building upon it so that a student can eventually master that. So when they come in, that first 30 minutes in class, your tutor will have a board similar to the one you see on this slide. A lot of times, everything will be handwritten because we want to be very basic so that you can repeat this at home. You can do it on the road. You can do it anywhere. And so your tutor will have the 7 strands that they are going to be going over on the board, and they will move through them, reciting each thing 7 times through. So why they are doing that is research has shown that if you hear something, repeat something 7 times, you're more likely to remember it. What's remarkable is they hear these things and it really does stick. So my apologies, you are going to be singing the timeline song in your sleep. You are going to be reciting math facts. You are going to have these classification of living things that just kind of come to you because it gets into who you are. And that's the beauty of it. They are memorizing these things at a young age. And while they may not know what Newton's third law of physics really means, they have a concept of it. And they can recite information so that when they get to that more dialectic stage and you dive into it more, it really starts to click because they see how this is working. And when we're memorizing things about history, the tutor is not going to go around and tell you everything that's going on in the world at that time period. We're just going to memorize that history song during that component. And then that is your opportunity to go home and dive into that more deeply. If your student really loves history, there's a lot of resources. And so here's a springboard to jump into a subject for the week. So your week is somewhat planned for you when it comes to what you're going to learn about. If you're going to talk about history, science, and grammar, etc., we have a topic for you to start with, and we have some resources to help you do that at home. It's just in the different ways. That's why it's important to be present in the class. Your tutor is going to sometimes have it set to song. Sometimes they're going to do motions for it. Sometimes they're going to do silly verses or voices. Sometimes they're going to march around the room. But in all of it, it's to try to demonstrate a different way. You can see how your student responds, what resonates well with them. Are they someone who, if they have hand motions that go with the different timeline, then that triggers them to remember it? Or do they need it set to a song? Do they need to just have fun with it? So that's an important part of being in there. You'll see this asterisk next to the Bible. So the Bible is not necessarily part of the new grammar that is on the board when you come in. There is a weekly guide that CC provides for you that you can utilize. Sometimes the communities will do that during their opening assembly. Sometimes that is going to be just something you do at home. And the idea is we want to give you that resource, but we're not going to try to overwhelm a student, right? So if you have a church that has a reading plan that you're already doing a memory verses that you are having your children copy at home for their handwriting as they're learning the alphabet and going through the books of the Bible, etc. CC is not trying to give you too much, but they do want to equip you well. So that is a resource for you that is not part of our Memory Master program, but it is something there as a tool for you. Before I move, I'm going to go back 1 second because just to tie in so that you understand too, the at-home part, this is where sometimes people get overwhelmed. It's different in every home, but one of the great things, where'd they go? I brought some of my printouts. When you join CC and you become a member, you have resources online. And so the thing that has helped me a lot is this weekly plan that is in our Sandbox Easing that is every week for foundations. They also have it for essentials. And so that little list there helps me just remember what I need to do. Or if I want to learn some more about the history, there's book recommendations down here at the bottom that we can check out from the library. There are chapters in Old World Echoes or Senators of Rome, Exploring the Heavens, that tie into what we are learning that week. So if it's a beautiful day like Friday was, we'd go sit outside and read those chapters aloud, and it all ties in together. So it's a great resource. And then there's other worksheets so that if you have multiple students, you can have a student working on, memorizing, or their fine motor skills are even in here. I really love these resources. There's different layers and levels of them. So if you have a student who's still learning to hold a pencil and copy, then there's dotted words for them to copy. If they are older, like mine is now, then it's just fill in the blank for you to have them practice filling in the blank. But those resources have been great to help me know what to do and how to do it at home. Because again, we want to equip you. And if you're lost and you don't know what to do, your tutor is your first best friend. They want to help you succeed. They want to answer your questions. If you're concerned about your child's behavior in class, if you're concerned about their participation or lack of participation, your tutor wants to partner with you. And so make sure and talk to them, your director as well. We are all here. We've been through it. There's nothing new under the sun. There's no issue that your family is going through that we've either not experienced ourselves or know somebody who has experienced. And so we just really want to come together as a community and support one another. So another one of our CRIS components is our science demonstrations. These vary by cycle, and we saw that whenever I was showing you the 3 different cycles. So like this next 6 weeks, we're about to build a whole bunch of straw towers, and we're going to build bridges and practice in action the physics that we learned through experiments that we had done the previous 6 weeks. And so we do a nice cycle through those science demonstrations where there'll be 6 weeks of experiments where we're leading your student through the scientific method. We're helping them learn, what do I already know? What do I not know? So then what might be a question I have? And then how will I perform this experiment? What materials do I need? And the beauty of these science experiments, and they are basic. You have pretty much everything that you need in your kitchen, in your home, or pick up an item or 2 at the grocery store that week. So you have more toothpicks for the experiment. But they're basic so that it's enjoyable, it's repeatable, and you can do it at home as well. The experiment notes are always in that Sandbox Easing that I talked about as well, so that if you want to go home, if your student loves science or if you like science like I do, then we like to go back and repeat. Did we get the same results? Why not? How many times do you think we would need to do this to get a good understanding of what's actually happening here? Because oftentimes in class, and the tutor doesn't like when this happens, but I do, it does not go the way it was planned. So the results of the experiment didn't happen, but that's life. We expect one thing and something else happens. And so we work through that and we say, okay, well, then why did this happen? What do you think we should change to make this a better experiment? So these conversations, starting at 4 years old, they build. So they're going to repeat because the cycles repeat. So even though your student did it as a 4-year-old, they're going to do this same experiment again as a 7-year-old and again as a 10-year-old. And the conversations, if you are not part right now, but if you just visit, it's encouraging to go from that abecedarian class and then walk up to the master's class. And you watch the science experiment and the funny things that happen with those 4 and 5-year-olds. And then you walk into that master's class with those 5th and 6th graders and the depth of conversation that's happening, sometimes the funny things that happen in there as well. But the layers that are building and the knowledge that is gained, the way that they now know to ask different questions than they did that first time when they saw it. And remarkably, they don't remember the experiment most of the time. Their hypothesis is still wrong. So don't think that just because they saw it once that they know everything. They don't. It's been enough time that they are still awestruck sometimes with why the pepper ran away from the toothpick. Um, so for fine arts, that's another one of our CRISP components. And you see these also alternate. We have 4 different focuses when we do fine arts. Our first 6 weeks, we're really breaking down drawing skills. As Krista was talking about how all of our strands interact with one another, drawing is a big part of a lot of different strands. It's not just art, but whenever you're trying to draw a chart for science, or you're trying to demonstrate something that you saw in nature, or you want to do a presentation in the challenge levels, that's where they do it a lot with science. They're drawing images each week and presenting on it. And so these basic skills of oils has taken this non-artist into a place where I feel like I can kind of draw things. I do think that my 9-year-old is actually still a better artist than me, but I try. And I do understand that I can now look at things differently and get my brain to wrap around it so that perhaps I can draw it a little bit better. But it's a simple introduction to art and how to see it differently to help each child learn that they can actually draw a picture of Piggy and Elephant if they just break it down into these simple components. We do 6 weeks of music theory. That is the beautiful sounds of a tin whistle. But we are using that as an avenue to introduce what is rhythm, what is a note, what's a quarter note. They get basic understanding of music, how it's designed, what a measure is, and then they practice a song and will perform that. Some of them really take off with it. My son, my oldest, our first year in CC, his first tin whistle music lesson, came home, set up a table in the front yard with a sign that said songs will be played for $2. He thought that he was already ready to give concerts after one simple lesson. So it's really fun to see how they enjoy that, what confidence can come from a lesson like that. And then we do 6 weeks of famous artists. Just like our cycles, we have 3 cycles. You're going to have 6 different artists each cycle for a total of 18 different famous artists that your student is learning to attend to their art. And then they are practicing a notable style of that artist. So for example, this past 6 weeks, we just concluded, we had Van Gogh in there. So our students were learning how to make movement. How do I capture to make it look like something is swirling on a page? When they were looking at Monet, how do I dabble this paint to make it look like the water and the movement of it? What's a recognizable thing about Rembrandt? Well, he was really good at shadows. And so the idea is not necessarily to learn a ton about the artist, but to attend to one notable feature of the artist so that maybe you're out at an art museum or they see a picture on a book while you're at a store somewhere and they say, hey, that looks like the water lilies that we painted. Wasn't that Monet? And so it starts to give them that recognition. And it also starts to let them just experiment. I see art a lot as science. We're experimenting with these colors. We're seeing what they do when we blend them together. We're seeing what they do whenever we swoosh it across or whenever we, really go back and forth with it. What if I take this paper towel and blot at it? There's a lot of just fun with that art and sometimes messes, but that's okay. That's childhood. It's going to get messy. And then the last 6 weeks, we do famous musicians. Now, while we have 6 weeks for it, we're not focusing all 6 weeks on 6 different composers. We focus in on 3. We give them a basic understanding of orchestra, the sounds of the instruments, and we try to really just pique their interest. And the focus here is helping them learn how to sit still. That's very difficult, especially well, at all the ages. It's very difficult at all the ages to sit still for 5 to 12 minutes and listen to a piece of music. But it is a skill, and it's a way to help them learn to appreciate what a crescendo is, help them appreciate how this music makes an emotion come in your heart. And you might feel light and joyful at the end of this, or you might feel a little concerned when you're listening to this. And that's because of the instruments and the way God designed our ear and the way it interacts with our mind and our experiences we've had. And then they will learn, these three artists, just to notice and recognize some of the characteristics of those pieces. But when they get to the challenge level, they dive into these artists, whether it's Van Gogh or it's Beethoven. They really learn them then. Again, we're giving them that foundation that they will build upon as they continue their education. My favorite part is presentations, or as my son still says, and I refuse to correct him, that he will presentate each week. And so it's a sweet little thing that happens when they are doing these things. But they stand up in front of their classmates and they give a 2 to 3 minute speech. They ask questions, or they don't, well, they do both. They take questions and learn how to answer them while standing on their feet. What a skill to develop in a child, that they can confidently stand in front of a group of their peers, present on something that interests them, and then take questions from the class and be able to answer them. And conversely, the student who's listening to the presentation is again learning how to sit still, learning how to be respectful to the person who is presenting, and learning what a good question is and learning what a not good question is. And so there's a lot of skills that get taught in this time period. When they are young, sometimes mom stands with them. And sometimes child doesn't want to say anything, but it's beautiful to watch them just kind of unfold like a flower. And eventually, we've watched this one student that has several challenges go from unable to stand in front of her class and present out of great fear. And so she would have to record and then show her presentation because there was just no, and mom would have to stand with her. And we watched eventually she could stand by herself and hold and do her presentation, and mom didn't have to be there. And she's now standing in front of her class. She's now standing in front of her essentials class, reading her papers to them. And it's just been so amazing to watch what the Lord has done in helping take the yoke off of this child, right? She's been chained where she felt she could not speak. And now she has a voice. And it's been really sweet to watch that. They will do that every week. So 24 times a year, they stand in front of their classmates and do that. So multiply that over the number of years, and you see what a great skill set they are learning. That last component is our review games. And so this is where we will come in and review all the things that they learned in new grammar, because we're trying to get the information to go from short-term memory to long-term memory. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to show you how to have fun and review. So sometimes those review games will be the teacher is just talking to them while they're playing with Play-Doh or they're building with Legos. Other times we set up, cups with a Nerf gun. And when they answer a question, they get a bullet and they get to try to knock down the Tower of Cups, or they are throwing a beanbag into a game. We just try to make it fun because learning should be fun. And a lot of times they don't even realize how much they know. But we're reviewing 6 weeks worth of work because the goal is for them to retain all of the information, not just what they learned that day. So I think that I covered everything that I intended to, Krista, so I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, you're on mute, Krista.
Okay, thank you. Good save. This is where we help each other, right? So my daughter's here. If you, do you have a stool? You do have a stool. I do have. So we have that with the dog. My dog wants to participate in everything. The dog wouldn't participate as well. He is a golden retriever. So now the mic is kind of funny. So Carrie let me know, like for some reason it has to point funny. So so Reagan, I was just gonna ask This is my daughter Reagan. She was in the one of the earlier slides. She is 23 and she is about to graduate.
About that.
I'm getting old, so I'm getting, I'm starting to get forgetful with my gray hairs. I'm going to ask her a few questions. So she is about to graduate college now. She graduated from CC, as I said earlier. So Reagan, let's see, what are some things that you think that CC has helped you with to be prepared for college and just for life in general?
Oh, okay. So is this foundations?
This is foundations.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for foundation, starting at the, just like the memory work. Like, what about the timeline or what memory work? Yeah.
Well, the timeline, let me tell you, it never leaves your head. I think I use it all the time. I have a friend who likes to text me random like cards off the timeline, and then it's stuck in my head for the rest of the day. But it's very helpful because like I'm at school and we're reading about like Bismarck, and somebody's like, "Oh, well, when was this guy around?" I'm like, "Oh, I have a timeline in my head." So that's the most glaring example of how the
Yeah.
no, not the dog. That's the most glaring example of how the memory work has been helpful. But I mean, I still use all of it all the time. I can recite the history sentences for you. I remember all the science stuff. I did the math tables. And all of that is a really good foundation. That wasn't even on purpose. Foundation to build things on. So now that I'm remembering, oh, Bismarck was around this time, and that I'm reading history, I can put things together a lot better. And also, I mean, the Latin was super helpful when I studied Latin in high school, and then when I did French and Greek, that was also very useful. So let's see, goodness, what else do we do?
Because it taught you the strategies for how to learn a language.
That's true.
Am I right?
Flashcards are my favorite thing now, which I learned from Foundations. But yeah, I think the memory work was super, super helpful.
How about the presentation skills? Like so in the beginning.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So like how often do you have to speak before a large audience, or how often do you have to speak before an audience in college?
I mean, we have discussion-based classes, so all the time. Every class is me talking to a group of 20 people or so. Sometimes I stand in front of the college and talk. That's happened a couple times.
Yeah, she had to speak before the mayor of Annapolis.
Yeah, we like had a ribbon cutting thing and I had to give a speech. And I was not one of the bashful children. I was one of the talkative children. But so that was more helpful in me, instead of going up there and going, let me tell you about this thing, actually having a thing to talk about and then calmly presenting it and being organized in how I talk about things. This also gets into essentials, but you'll get there eventually.
Yes, yeah. And all the programs work together.
And tin whistle's fun. I still play tin whistle.
Yes, she's become very.
I play a lot of Irish music on the tin whistle. That's just a little aside. It's great. It's helpful for music in general, which I ended up doing later.
And then would you like to speak to the community aspect? First off, so community within our family, like the community culture, and then also the community within like CC helping us through some hard times. And then community that you found community outside, like from other graduates. So got those three things.
Yeah, okay. This is IEW 1, 2, and 3. That's essential stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, so community within the family, I'm not as good to speak on this as my brothers because there's a 9-year gap between me and the next. So by the time they were doing Foundations and Essentials, I was in college.
Well, but I'm thinking of like you shoot me texts all the time. Oh, okay, I apologize. This is a mother-daughter dynamic.
Yes, this is like my older sister. She's great. But where was I? Oh yes. So, but I do come home and hear the boys singing their history sentences, or hear them doing the timeline song and being like, "Oh, you're doing that thing." And we can all I've done the same thing, although they've changed the curriculum a little bit. And so they'll be like, "I don't understand why I'm doing this darn Latin thing. What is this? Why am I memorizing this?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, let me show you." And I go pull out my Caesar's Gallic Wars, and I'm like, "Well, now I can read this and this and this." And they go, "Reagan, you're so cool." And I'm like, "I just did the same thing you did. I'm just a little farther on the track. I'm not that cool. You're gonna be that cool." And yeah, and I do text mom all the time with "Oh, what is it like?"
I think you were doing a Faraday experiment.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's a lot of challenge stuff too. But I'll do an experiment about Faraday, and I'll be like, "Hey, we did this in foundations and a little bit in challenge, and now I'm doing it. Or I'll be reading Einstein, or I'll be doing Linnaeus and things like that. All these people, and I go back to Mom. I'm like, hey, this thing you were teaching me, I'm doing it now, which is very fun.
Okay,
And
and
then-
then helping us through.
She might have thoughts on that.
Oh,
I don't know
well,
what your
okay.
thoughts are.
All right, so how about like when you went overseas? So you were in Germany and Switzerland for a while, and did you?
Yeah, so there are CC people everywhere. I ran into them when I lived in Switzerland. I run into them at my college. I run into them in DC. So there, you can find them in a crowd because you can just say a couple bars of the Timeline song and somebody goes, "Oh, why did you do that?" But more seriously, there are CC people all over, and so I have this common connection. I run into people with, "Oh, you did this thing together." I suspect people do not have much of a common bond over, oh, you did public school together? That's great. No. But we all like love CC and we've enjoyed it.
So it's a broader community. All right, awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yep. All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I'm going to go into the resources. I'm going to try to do this kind of quickly. So Reagan could wax very poetic on her love of CC. So
You could just talk a lot is what that boils down to.
runs in the family. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I skipped that slide. All right, so I'm going to go through going through like the resources that we're going to use. Now, Carrie, for some reason on my side it says my camera's not working. Can you still see me? You can?
Yes, I
Okay.
can.
All right, it kind of glitches out on me sometimes. Okay, so you could take a screenshot of this if you want. I'm not going to go into this in the interest of time, but this is kind of explaining what our strands are. It's more related to the challenge level, but that you'll notice that they all have the common theme of discovering truth and utilizing truth. So we're going to go through the catalog a little bit, just the things that are generally helpful in the foundations level. It does skip around a little bit. But we're going to start with talking about parent resources. So you already heard me reference Classical Christian Education, Made Approachable. This is just a handy little book. It's very thin, it's very small. It's great for handing a dad who's doubting, or grandparents who are like, why are you doing this weird thing to our child? But also in there is Dorothy Sayers' Lost Tool of Writing essay, which is very foundational to anybody who's in classical education understands that this is something that has reinvigorated the classical movement. And I'll tell you, like I said earlier, there are going to be days that it gets hard and it gets difficult. And so feeding into yourself about education and why you're doing what you're doing is very important. So Lee is now putting out this new book, The Habits of a Classical Education. This is more directed at mostly the youngest moms, the moms that maybe they were not homeschooled, or their parents didn't necessarily, they entrusted their students, their children, to the schools to teach them these things. So they didn't have model to them how to teach their child how to hold a pencil, how to teach your child to sit still and pay attention to a lesson. So this is like a grandmotherly type wisdom of guiding you through, okay, this is what you do to help to get your child prepared for attending to things and working on schoolwork and such. But also it's a little bit of a decompression of school does not have to look like what homeschool does not have to look like school at home. So she kind of walks you through that a little bit. These are a few resources that I find very inspiring. They're especially good for the younger years. They're in further parts of the catalog, unfortunately, but I like these two in particular. The Paideia of God. I know I'm not saying that right, but Paideia of God by Douglas Wilson, and then Repairing the Ruins, which has some Douglas Wilson, but a lot of other really good authors as well. These are both collections of essays that are about education and classical education. Some of them are topical. There's one about math. There is one about, it's called Worldview Test Case. There's scriptural thinking, Christian discipline. There's a chapter in here about egalitarianism, and no, it has nothing to do with men and women in the church. It actually has a greater, far-reaching goal than that. But these are really good just for feeding your mindset, like kind of reinvigorating your mindset, especially on like January, February days when you're feeling kind of down and like, why am I doing this thing? This one I'm not all the way through this yet, but it does have a kind of provoking chapter on learning disabilities or learning difficulties that I think is worth a read. And just let's make sure that we're thinking about learning difficulties. It's a big thing in our culture right now. Everybody's getting like letters assigned to them. And how do we think biblically about those things? But there are a lot of other essays in here about that. And then this one is just a nice, let's see. Well, I brought a different one of his books. This is also another book that we have, but A Case for Classical Christian Education, Douglas Wilson. And then this is the Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning, also by Douglas Wilson. These are very good. Like if you're new to the classical education model, trying to get a big picture understanding, okay, why am I doing this weird thing when all my neighbors are doing something else? And so I always say, feed yourself. When they say like on the airplane, put on your own oxygen mask before you try to help someone else. You need to feed your soul and feed your heart and feed your mind with what is this classical education thing I'm doing, so that you can feed back into others, both in your community and in your home. So parent resources to me are not optional. In the catalog, they're called Cultivating Christian Leaders, because we feel that every homeschool mom is a leader in her home. So don't be mistaken. Those are not intended. That's not just for, your director or your tutor or your local rep or something like that. That's meant for you. You are the leader in the community and in your home. Required resources. So let's just get this like straight. Like there are only 2 required resources to be in Foundations. This catalog is full of fun things, but there are only 2 things you need to start Foundations, and it can stay that way. I found that these, if all I have, sometimes we've had to do school in a temporary. Well, my child's been hospitalized a number of times, so we've had to live like in apartments in a city far away from home. And I know that if I have to just jump in the car, the only thing I really need is my Foundations guide. And then often we bring the tin whistle, one for each of the kids. So this is all you need. It has all the information for all 3 strands. If somebody is signing up in cycle 3, there's going to be a special like insert, because we're going to be updating this guide just a little bit. It's not going to be dramatic, but we're going to be updating it. But if anybody is planning on buying the new edition of it when it comes out in 2027, they just want the cycle 3 work of the current edition, they can just buy that separately, so they don't have to buy the big guide just to get them through until the next year. All right, so helpful memory work extras that I really appreciate. So I know that first one there, the blue one, it looks like it's just this flat static thing, but it's actually this trifold thing, or sorry, not trifold, I guess it would be quad fold. So there are 8 panels on it. And we do this for our geography. It really helps with doing like reviewing our memory work. There is a black line master on both sides. And what we do is we kind of go through, that the checklist that's here will be covered on this black line master map. And you can see my students been working on this. And then I can check the answers in here. If I'm like, oh, I can't remember where Bulgaria is or something, I can just look in here. Same thing on the other side, the world map. And this is for all the cycles. We have one of these for each one of the cycles. So I really appreciate that, because we do a lot of car school. This is really small. I can just tuck it in my backpack. It also saves my Foundations guide. These maps are actually printed in here, but this saves some of the wear and tear on my Foundations guide. Like if we're in a hurry. Also, I like these little rainbow flashcards. That's the one in the center there. I actually put this on my gear stick so that I can't drive without throwing this on my lap, or it'll get in my way. And then we stop at a stoplight. Instead of me whipping out my phone and checking to see if I have a new email or text, I say, oh, let's go over what are the countries of Southeast Asia, something like that. Or it's just a prompt to help me remember to keep working through our memory work. That way we're getting our memory work done without sitting at a desk. We can just do it while we're doing grocery shopping, etc. I might throw it on one of my other students' lap. I'll have my older son, I'll toss it on his lap, say, go through some of these with me. And so he's actually running school, and he's getting the mentorship, or he's learning how to mentor his younger siblings. The timeline songs, we talk about the timeline a lot. So these are, I don't know if I brought, oh yeah, I bring some down. So I put these are usually loose, but I put mine in a binder so that we can flip through them easily, because it becomes an encyclopedia for us. These are not required, but tutors will have these in class. And when your student has a question about what does it mean, patriarchs of Israel, you can turn over to the backside and there's a ton of content. It's almost like an encyclopedia, like I said. You can start answering some of those questions when you get home. It shows you where in the world it is, where it is in the time periods, and gives you the specific date up there. And most of the artwork has something to do with like classical art of some sort, or an artifact. This is talking about the Hittites and Canaanites. It's showing the map, but it also shows an artifact from the Hittites. Or sorry, this is a Canaanite, because it's a Canaanite idol, I believe. But they all have like beautiful art. to kind of illustrate, but we treat this, we didn't just use this in foundations, we're still using it in challenge. We used it in all our years of challenge going through. And as a reference for when we have to write a paper, we need to be like, okay, so I know the timeline song, where's a little bit more information, and then I can launch off from there on it. So those are something that we just acquire gradually over the years. Some people don't buy them don't buy them in one big set. They just say, okay, this year I'm buying set 1. And then next year, if I have the room in my budget, I'll buy set 2. So it's kind of a gradual acquisition. The flashcards in the middle there, those are just, multiplication flashcards, although they do show the commutative law, how multiplication facts work both ways. And then the prescripts, this is the green ones are for a little bit older students because it does have whole sentences. The prescripts come in many different levels. It starts off with letters, then it moves to words. So the letters are orange. Words are red, like this one. Green is doing whole history sentences, and that supports your cycle 3 memory work. So we'll copy whole sentences. And then when you get up in the challenge levels, they're whole passages. We do, so CC, when you go home, like the foundations material is enough. But you do need to add 2 things on at home. You need a phonics program, and you need a math program. CC does have its own math curriculum. It is a little different because it is classical. I'm not going to go in depth about that now. I actually do a whole training course on this. So we're going to kind of skip over that. But when it comes to phonics, you can choose outside programs if you like. We have used a number of different things. We used to carry something called Spell to Write and Read that I really loved. But the Writing Road to Reading is following the same method. They're both a Spalding method. This is actually a fairly inexpensive book that teaches you the process for teaching anyone to learn to read. It's not an open and go resource. You don't open to page 5 and there's a scripted thing for you to read, but it does give you everything that you need so that you can grab any book and teach your child to read. Anytime you're looking at a phonics curriculum, though, I'll tell you there's a litmus test that I use. A lot of them will say they're teaching phonics, but they're not. They might be teaching sound blends like ST. They'll treat that like and that's just a sound. Those are sound blends. Those are not phonograms. The letter A has 3 sounds that it makes. It's a, ah. If they're not teaching all that, that's just a real quick giveaway that it's not actually phonics. It's like, it's really what do they call it? The CSA learning method, but it's kind of giving a fake image of phonics. In fact, some of those famous phonics, what they call reading programs, that actually have phonics in their title are actually not teaching phonics. So be aware of that. There is another phonogram that you can use as a test. It's OUGH that has 6 sounds. OUGH is O, of, off, ow. And if you ask somebody who is like in their 80s and you show them that, they'll probably be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. O, of, off, ow, because they learned the classical method and they learned how to read using proper phonics. So I would just make sure that whatever phonics program you're grabbing, that they are actually teaching that. So on the right there, you'll see a list of readers that we carry. These are fine. I also like McGuffrey's readers, but there's a lot of different programs that you can use. These are like sequentially through, and they're nice, gentle stories. My kids like them. They're good character stories without being too dry, but they do definitely incorporate the phonograms in there sequentially. And then on the left there, you'll see there's something called Scribblers at Home. This has, because we call our youngest kids, we call them scribblers, because they're not really in the writing stage yet. Before they get to essentials, in essentials, they learn writing, like composition and more elaborate English language structures. But when they're before that, we kind of just, it's sort of just a kind of a catch-all phrase that we say. They're kind of still in the scribbler stage. They're not writing elaborately. So that can give you the impression that Scribblers at Home is only for small children. That's not the case. This is a book that goes all the way from when they're the very littlest all the way up through the challenge level. What it does is sort of like a detox from public school, because if we think that sitting at a desk or sitting with a worksheet is somehow education, we've missed what education is really meant to be. So there's a lot of lessons in here. Well, here's a good example. So we were just talking about phonics. So they'll be on this side of the page. There will be an activity of how you can discuss, how you can teach just around at the doctor's office. This is another thing we throw in the car a lot. While you're at the doctor's office, you have a few minutes while you're waiting, you open it up and you just have a little activity. There's a learning activity. You're not sitting at a desk. You could be outside at the creek, you could be at the park, and you just incorporate the activity here. This side, however, there's usually a chart, and this is a good example. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a good example of what real phonograms should look like. There's 77 phonograms in the English language. And there's that oh, ooh, ah, ah, ow right there, with examples of each where it's demonstrated in different words. But on this side of the page will be charts that are relevant to parents. What we say sometimes when we're homeschooling is that we just need to stay one step ahead of our kids. And sometimes, especially in a challenge level, they go past me. My daughter has definitely surpassed me in her education. I'm very envious. But this kind of helps us stay one step ahead. There's fabulous things that play into the challenge levels through here. Let me flip over to a challenge A. Oh, did I go too far? This is for science fair, understanding different types of graphs that you can use when displaying your data and research in science fair. But then on this side of the page, it's still an activity that you can use with your younger children. You can use this, you can actually still use this on challenge students. I have. This side can still work for just about any age, but it is more helping moms detox from the public school idea. And then this side kind of demonstrates through a chart or something, resources that'll help you as you go down the road. And I tab out all my resources, my foundations guide, I tab that out, I tab this out. I put across the top what different areas I'll be using those in. And then I put along this side the different subjects. You see phonics, poetry, science, Latin, Bible, etc. So, all right, moving on. So some other resources we have. So when Carrie made a reference to those pages that you can print off CC Connected, which I'll show you an example of that. But she referenced the Emperors of Rome or the New World Echoes books. The Echoes books are sort of like fairy tales and stories that are culturally relevant. They have stood the test of time. We are still passing them along. So that's about cultural relevancy. We have the blue book on the left is a very nice way to teach science. These are reprints of old French books that have been translated, where it's just there's a meta story format where an uncle is teaching things to his niece and nephew about science. This year we were learning about lightning striking a tree, how lightning happens. They were inside their home. They were talking about static electricity, but it's teaching science through a very natural, story-based format. And then Emperors of Rome gives that structure for understanding civilizations of Greece and Rome, which will play into the challenge levels. We do have new Latin flashcards that are for the younger students, for those of you who want to branch off into more Latin. We don't encourage full Latin study at the young age, but just soaking in some of the vocab is a very good thing to just kind of insert into their brain so they have it at their ready when they get into the challenge years. All right, so let's talk about CC Connected, the online resources. So, Carrie, I added these slides. I thought this would be helpful real quick. But when you become a member, there's online access to what we call the Learning Center. And we can do a full walkthrough another time, but basically you just pick it by what program you're in. So like foundations here, you'll see on the very first week, it's called First Things. This is before you get into cycle specific stuff. There are videos that kind of walk you through. There is a whole digital directory. I suggest you finding that and kind of looking through that and to see what else is available on there. This would be the Sandbox e-zine, which is what Carrie was talking about earlier for if you're like, what do I do at home? Where's a nice checklist for what I should work on? This is what it looks like when you first click on it, but then when you open it up, it'll have the sandbox across the top, and you can choose which pages you're going to print out. Within that are these morning time plans. If you've been in Charlotte Mason learning or in classical education very long, I think you've heard of like the morning basket. This is a similar concept. It encourages you to do your memory work, read from, this one says Old World Echoes, read this story from here, and some additional recommended reading that you could do. Some of us want a little more structure and just say, when I get up on a Monday morning and it's cloudy and rainy, what should I do? I'll grab my checklist and just start working through that. And before you know it, you feel good, you're reinvigorated, and you remember why you loved homeschooling to begin with. There's also videos of the timeline songs if you want to learn things more at home. There's a lot of great videos on there. But I do want to encourage you, These things are for summer prep. You can still use these throughout the year, but don't expect to be able to print all the things, the resources that you want on a rainy February day. You just won't. I strongly recommend that you go on during the summer and go through things during that time, decide what you want. I can, if anybody has any questions about how to organize your resources, I can go through that another time. But there are ways that you can save things by hearting them on CC Connected to save them so that when you go back, and it is February, you can just jump on there and be like, oh yeah, that's right. We were going to watch this video and do it this way. And you don't have to worry about digging in the middle of a hard day. All right, so that's basically all I have. If any parents have any questions, it's now like it's parent Q&A time. So from the parent's perspective, I do need to update this discount code because it's not correct. So I'm going to type the discount code in the chat. So that'll be, see if I can remember it off the top of my head. Yes, I can. And my coupon right now is for, you get a free, when you spend $75, you get a free Trivium table, which would be like these fold out things for any level, because they have these up through challenge as well. Trivium tables, flashcards, which include the Latin flashcards, Math Map flashcards, and the Memory Work flashcards. You get that for free. Well, also, I know I've got Nicole on here. If you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to add, or Deborah, if you guys, not just like if you don't have any questions, but do you have anything that about your experience that you'd like to share of what CC has meant for you guys, or have any insight from moms?
I would share.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, just especially for the first year moms. That first year, it can be intimidating because you think you have to do all of the extra things. And you haven't had time to see maybe necessarily the value yet behind the memory work. And so I think I was trying to do a lot of extra things, and you can start searching on YouTube and Pinterest, and there's all these wonderful ideas, and then it becomes overwhelming. And then you can get in that lovely mom trap of comparing yourself, not doing enough. And, we're all in different seasons. And then you have to remind yourself, some of those moms, they're using their YouTube as a business. So she's going to push everything.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe she doesn't even do everything. So I think just sticking and focusing in more on your community, your kids, and your memory work. And sure, I say that first year, the library is your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Just go to the library and get books related to the memory work. You've got the whole cycle laid out. You want to go get 3 weeks worth of books related to, the states, then let's go do that. Human anatomy, when we do that, let's go do that. And just color and read with your kids as you extend on the topic at home. It doesn't have to be a ton. Get together and have play dates with the other kids in the class to help them build their relationships. So
yeah, that's good wisdom. Yeah, and that's very much why we say, yeah, there are lots of things out there, both in the CC catalog and other places, but like you really just need your memory work, and just to teach your kids to love learning, have fun with them, sit and read a book. But yeah, sometimes staying off the internet's a good thing. So I don't use CC Connected as much as some people do, because I know that can be a rabbit hole I can lose myself on, and the comparison. So yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and just I want to thank you all for attending today, and please reach out to Carrie or I if you have any questions. So I think I just hit this. Yep. All right. Thank you, Carrie.